The streets of Delhi are filled once again. Crowds stretch across major roads. Barricades divide neighborhoods. Police officers stand shoulder to shoulder behind riot shields as thousands of protesters raise banners and chant slogans demanding change. Traffic slows to a crawl. News helicopters circle overhead. Across television screens and social media feeds, one question dominates the conversation. Why do protests in India become so powerful? These scenes may seem extraordinary, but they are far from unique. For nearly a century, protests have repeatedly shaped the destiny of the world's largest democracy. Some challenged an empire. Some forced governments to change course. Others transformed laws, politics, and society itself. To understand why India's streets continued to become arenas of political change, we have to travel back almost 100 years to a time when one simple household item became the symbol of an entire nation's struggle. In 1930, India remained under British colonial rule. Among the many taxes imposed by the British Empire was one that touched every family: the salt tax. Indians could not freely produce or sell their own salt. Even the poorest citizens were forced to buy heavily taxed salt controlled by the colonial government. Mahatma Gandhi understood that salt was more than a commodity. Every person needed it, regardless of religion, language, or wealth. Instead of launching an armed rebellion, he chose an act of peaceful defiance. On March 12, 1930, Gandhi and 78 followers began walking from Sabarmati Ashram toward the coastal village of Dandi. Their journey covered nearly 240 miles. As they walked through village after village, thousands joined them. Farmers left their fields. Workers left their factories. Students abandoned classrooms. The march transformed into a national movement before the eyes of the world. 24 days later, Gandhi reached the Arabian Sea, bent down, and picked up a handful of natural salt. It was a simple act, but one that openly violated British law. Across India, millions followed his example. People produced salt illegally, refused to pay taxes, and participated in civil disobedience campaigns. British authorities responded with arrests, imprisoning tens of thousands, including Gandhi himself. Yet every arrest attracted even greater international attention. The Salt March proved something extraordinary. A peaceful protest could shake one of the most powerful empires on earth. It became one of the defining moments in India's independence movement and inspired civil rights campaigns around the world. But independence did not mark the end of protest in India. In many ways, it marked the beginning of a new chapter. More than 4 decades later, another movement emerged, this time against India's own elected government. By the early 1970s, inflation was soaring. Corruption allegations were growing. Many young Indians felt that the promises made after independence had not been fulfilled. The unrest began with students in Gujarat and Bihar. Demonstrations spread rapidly, eventually drawing the support of veteran independence leader Jayaprakash Narayan, widely known as JP. JP called for what he described as a total revolution, a peaceful transformation of politics, governance, and public life. Massive rallies filled city streets. Opposition parties united behind the movement. Millions demanded accountability from Prime Minister Indira Gandhi's government. Then came one of the most controversial decisions in independent India's history. On June 25, 1975, a nationwide emergency was declared. Civil liberties were suspended. Political opponents were arrested. Press censorship was imposed. Public protests were heavily restricted. For 21 months, India experienced one of the most debated periods in its democratic history. Yet the story did not end there. When elections were finally held in 1977, voters delivered a historic verdict. The ruling government lost power for the first time since independence. The protests of the 1970s demonstrated that public mobilization, combined with democratic elections, could fundamentally reshape India's political landscape. Just over a decade later, another protest movement emerged, but this time, it divided public opinion unlike almost any before it. In 1990, Prime Minister V.P. Singh announced the implementation of recommendations from the Mandal Commission, expanding reservations in government jobs for other backward classes. Supporters viewed the policy as a long overdue step toward social justice. Opponents argued it threatened merit-based opportunities. Universities became the center of nationwide demonstrations. Students marched through campuses. Sit-ins and strikes spread across multiple states. The country witnessed heated public debate over equality, opportunity, and affirmative action. The Mandal protests left a lasting political legacy. They reshaped electoral alliances, influenced future governments, and permanently changed discussions surrounding social representation in India. 2 decades later, another issue united people from very different backgrounds: corruption. In 2011, social activist Anna Hazare launched a hunger strike demanding stronger anti-corruption legislation through the proposed Jan Lokpal bill. What began as one man's fast quickly became a nationwide movement. Thousands gathered at Delhi's Ramlila Maidan waving Indian flags. Volunteers organized marches in cities across the country. Office workers, students, business owners, and retirees stood together demanding greater transparency in public life. Television channels broadcast the movement around the clock. Social media amplified its message even further. Although debates over anti-corruption reforms continued, the movement transformed public participation in politics and helped shape the rise of new political voices in the years that followed. Yet, only 1 year later, India would witness protests driven not by politics alone, but by grief. In December 2012, the brutal assault and death of a young woman in Delhi shocked the nation. Citizens poured into the streets demanding justice and stronger protections for women. Large crowds gathered near India Gate, despite winter conditions and heavy security. Many protesters carried candles rather than political banners. The demonstrations became a powerful national conversation about women's safety, policing, and the legal system. The government later introduced significant criminal law reforms addressing sexual violence. Although the tragedy itself could never be undone, the protests helped drive lasting legal and institutional changes. In 2017, attention shifted south to Tamil Nadu. The traditional bull-taming sport known as Jallikattu had been restricted following legal challenges related to animal welfare. For many residents, however, the issue represented something much larger than a sporting event. They believed it was deeply connected to Tamil identity, culture, and heritage. Thousands of young people gathered peacefully on Chennai's Marina Beach. What made these demonstrations remarkable was their organization. Large crowds coordinated largely without centralized political leadership. Volunteers distributed food, cleaned public spaces, and maintained order. Eventually, legislative action allowed Jallikattu to resume under revised legal provisions. The protests showed how regional identity and cultural traditions could mobilize enormous public participation. Then came one of the largest nationwide protest movements in recent Indian history. In 2019, Parliament passed the Citizenship Amendment Act, commonly known as the CAA. Supporters argued the law offered protection to certain persecuted religious minorities from neighboring countries. Critics raised concerns about its implications when viewed alongside proposed citizenship verification measures. Demonstrations spread across numerous cities. One of the most recognizable sites emerged in Delhi's Shaheen Bagh, where women maintained a continuous sit-in protest for months. The movement attracted global attention. Public discussions unfolded across universities, courts, media organizations, and community spaces. Supporters and opponents offered sharply different perspectives, reflecting the complexity of one of the country's most debated policy decisions. While legal and political discussions continued, another protest soon grew to an even larger scale. In 2020, the Indian government introduced 3 agricultural reform laws. Government leaders argued the reforms would modernize agricultural markets and expand opportunities for farmers. Many farmer organizations feared the changes could weaken existing support systems and increase uncertainty for agricultural communities. Convoys of tractors headed toward Delhi. Roads became temporary settlements. Entire camps emerged along the capital's borders. Families built kitchens, libraries, medical centers, and schools inside protest sites that would remain active for months. The demonstrations continued through changing seasons. Negotiations took place repeatedly. The movement attracted support from across India and significant attention internationally. Then, after more than a year of sustained protests, Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced that the 3 farm laws would be repealed. For many observers, it became one of the most significant examples in recent decades of sustained public protest, contributing to a major policy reversal. Today, India continues to witness new demonstrations over a wide range of issues. In Delhi and across the country, citizens continue to organize marches, sit-ins, public meetings, and campaigns reflecting concerns about employment, education, agriculture, public policy, regional issues, and many other subjects. Each movement has its own goals, its own participants, and its own story. Some remain local, others become national conversations. Some achieve immediate results. Others influence public debate for years before change arrives. Not every protest succeeds. Not every demand is accepted. But together, these movements reveal something remarkable about India's democratic journey. From Gandhi lifting a handful of salt from the shores of Dandi, to students filling university campuses, from candlelight vigils to year-long protest camps outside Delhi, ordinary citizens have repeatedly shown that collective action can shape national conversations. The methods have changed. The technology has changed. The generations have changed. Yet one tradition has remained constant. When millions believe their voices are not being heard, India's streets often become the place where history begins to move. Whether future protests lead to new laws, new governments, or simply new conversations, one lesson echoes across nearly a century of Indian history. The story of modern India has never been written only inside parliament buildings or government offices. Again and again, it has also been written by ordinary people gathering in public squares, walking together down dusty roads, standing through long nights, raising peaceful voices, and believing that change is possible. And as new demonstrations continue to unfold, that story is still being written.